Welcome to Gods of Odds. It is season number 5 of your National Football League North America. That is Brad Hoiseth over there in beautiful Southern California. I'm Dave Dabbah up in Northern California. And Mr. Hoiseth, this is our first recording of the season. It is week number 3 of your National Football League season, and it's still safe to say, as far as I'm concerned, Brad, that the Chicago Bears still do not have a starting quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know, Dave. We're going to get into that a little bit later because I think that's one of the games that was picked. I think they do. I just don't think it's the situation's very good right now. That's all I'll say. But it is season 5. Which that might be even more amazing than than any Bears drama going on, right? But it is season 5, and we're still here. I have a 3-1 lead in seasons, but it's kind of more like 2.5 to 1.5. I think last year I won by like 1 point or 2 points or something ridiculous. So, but the Chiefs, when they accept the Super Bowl trophy, Dave, they don't accept a half a trophy; they accept the whole thing. So I'm going to take it. And I got a 3-1 lead, but it was tight last year, and it ended up being another good season. So I'm looking forward to it. Finally back at it. I had some issues, some family things I was dealing with the first couple of weeks, and those were something I couldn't avoid. So I'm glad to be back and ready to roll.
All right, Mr. Hoiseth, glad to have you back. Now there's some rumors running around the internet that there might have been some point shaving that went on last year, but nonetheless, Mr. Hoiseth, congrats on your 3rd crown in 4 years of the Gods of Odds. Now, if you are new to the show, we pick the top 10 games that we think are actually worth spending some money on this particular weekend. We usually, I should say, record in the afternoon, but if you think I look a little sleepy, and Brad does too, because we're actually recording in the morning, which is something new for the Gods of Odds team. That being said, Mr. Hoiseth, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Not only that, but we're also recording on Wednesday. Sometimes we would get going on a Thursday or something like that, maybe even late Thursday. Sometimes it was, right before the Thursday night game. But this schedule's changed, and we had to adapt as well. So anyways, my first game is the Chargers at the Steelers. The Steelers are a 2-point favorite, and I'm going to take the Chargers in this one, Dave. I just think that, it's going to be a different Charger team than what we're used to seeing, right? I mean, Jim Harbaugh is a little bit more conservative. He would just as soon play the same kind of football that Pittsburgh wants to play, right? I mean, it's a similar style of football. He wants to get his big offensive lineman out there and wear you down and win a game in the 4th quarter. And so far it's working. It's worked everywhere the guy's gone. It worked at the University of San Diego. It worked at Stanford. It worked at San Francisco, worked at Michigan. And who am I to say it's not going to work with the Chargers? It's so far so good. I just think that Pittsburgh is still a little bit of ways away. I do like the option of Justin Fields at quarterback. I think he's a better player than Russell Wilson at this point in their career, but I still think the Steelers are a little bit away. It's a close line. It's a field goal game. It's not one of my favorite lines of the day, but I am going to take the Chargers. Historically, they do pretty well on the East Coast.
Look, I think it's absolutely amazing, Brad, that through the first 2 weeks of the season that we enter the 3rd week, and Mike Tomlin, I think a genius, absolute genius, has figured out how to get the Pittsburgh Steelers 2 wins in a row with Justin Fields as his starting quarterback. I'd be even more impressed if Russell Wilson had actually started for him. So I love what Jim Harbaugh is doing with the Los Angeles Chargers at this point. I think he's been absolutely fantastic in the strategy that he's put forth. J.K. Dobbins has looked like a Pro Bowler. He's actually looked like somebody you should give $20 million a year to, which, of course, they'll never do because he's a running back and you're part of the running backs are a dime a dozen committee.
You got it. You got it.
It's unbelievable, man. There's so much. I completely disagree about that. I say pay the man. That being said, I actually like the Steelers in this game, specifically because I heard that Herbert is still limping around. Not really sure if Herbert's going to start or not start at this point. As we know, it's Wednesday when we're recording this. So there's some information that we won't have until a little later in the week. Either way, I just absolutely love what Mike Tomlin's done with the Steeler defense so far this season. The defense actually is totally healthy heading into week 3. I like the Steelers at home, so I'm going to go ahead and give up 2 points.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Tomlin, how can you not like that guy? I mean, every single year the Steelers break we go 500 or better. I mean, I don't know how many years in a row it's been now, but really the last few years they haven't had a great roster. I like Justin Fields. I know that there's a lot of people out there that don't like him. I know in my particular fantasy football league last year, the second half of the season, he was the 6th or 7th best scoring quarterback in the league. So he was doing some good things despite the fact that the Bears don't have much of an offensive line. And last year they had a lot less weapons than they have this year. There's been criticism of his, ability to, make decisions on the field. I don't agree with any of that stuff, Dave. I think he's a fine player. I think he's in a much better situation now with a better coach and a better approach to the game. I think he's going to be okay, but I do think the Chargers are going to get the win in this one.
Look, it's like I always say, Brad, good coaching matters and bad coaching also matters. And if you don't have the right coaches around you, it's very difficult to succeed in the National Football League. With Justin Fields, I mean, maybe it's just a question of good coach. I mean, how else, Brad? Can you explain what Malik Willis did last weekend at the Green Bay Packers? I don't think we're covering the Packer game this week. It is just, he went 12 for 14. Malik Willis went 12 for 14 last week. Absolutely amazing.
And who did they play? I forget.
I don't even. Was it the Colts? It was the Colts, I think. Speaking of the Colts, my first game of the week is actually going to be Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears. The Colts. This game is in Indianapolis. The Colts are actually favored by 1.5 points. Look, I've never been on the Richardson ride. Super fun to watch play, for sure. Love the wide receivers on this particular Indianapolis Colts team. What I'm impressed with when it comes to the Chicago Bears is one thing, and that's actually their defense. And I think this defense, which has done a fairly good job of shutting down some pretty good football teams so far this season, is going to be dealing with its first not so good football team this week in the Indianapolis Colts. So I look for the defense to actually win this game. In terms of all of the Caleb Williams topics and all the Caleb Williams mayhem that's out there, the reality is with Caleb Williams at this point, he's having a hard time. He's sort of like Chris Everett, if you remember. He's struggling to actually plant his feet. The footwork is a problem. He's got a happy feet already, and we're only 2 weeks into the NFL season. You go back and you watch those overthrown passes towards the end of the game against the Houston Texans. What you'll see in your film study, Hoiseth, is that he throws off of 1 foot unnecessarily and doesn't plant the second, which actually causes the football to pull a Trevor Lawrence sail effect and sails over the wide receiver by 10 yards. So I actually like Chicago and Caleb Williams to eventually figure those things out. I've got to believe that Shane Waldron, who resurrected Geno Smith's career, is going to actually figure things out with Caleb Williams. I think that starts to happen a little bit. But once again, this weekend is really about the Bears defense shutting down the Colts. I'm taking the Bears.
Yeah, I'd love to see the Bears win this game, Dave.
Yeah.
It's one of those games, and you're going to hear this theme running throughout the show today, where I need to see a little bit more with the injury report before I would actually put some money on this deal. I don't think Caleb Williams' problems is Caleb Williams right now. I think Caleb Williams' problems is he hasn't had Keenan Allen, who is going to be the key to that offense. Everything's going to run through Keenan. He's the guy on 3rd and 5 that gets you 6 or 7 yards. He's not there. It's not there. And once he's out there, then the double teams happen, and Williams is going to have a chance to make some big plays. Right now, the defenses are just pinning their ears back because they know that his options are limited. There's not much out there for him to throw to. You know, Cole Kmet was a nice receiver last year. He hasn't seemed to, develop that relationship with him yet. Moore is more of a flyer, and he's a deep threat, that kind of thing. But he's not a guy that moves the chains on 3rd and 5. He's just not. And so that's what they got Keenan Allen for. They're waiting for him to get healthy. Having said that, I'm going to have to take the Colts in this one. I just, there's just too much unknowns. I can't believe they're going to lose to Malik Willis and Caleb Williams in back-to-back weeks, being that one was I don't even know the other one. And Williams is in his 3rd game as a pro. And again, another one of these things, Dave, that we talked about the last couple of years, and we didn't have a chance to talk about it the first 2 weeks because we weren't on the air, is the limited amount of time these guys play during the preseason.
Yeah.
They look terrible. They really do. He looks like a rookie quarterback that's never really played. And so it's going to take a while to fit into that. I think he's going to be fine eventually, but you got to have Allen out there on the field. If you don't have that, you're really missing one of your main weapons. And therefore, I'm going to take the Colts.
So Chicago was interesting. I mean, they did play Caleb during the preseason, but it's just not the same thing because we know that the opposing teams aren't actually playing their starting defenses for the most part. And it's sort of like somewhere between the UFL and college football. That's what the NFL preseason is really sort of like. I can't wait for the NFL preseason to just be done completely. I'm looking forward to the day when there are no preseason games, and like in college football, you just have to figure it out in practice and be ready to go. Now, of course, that does mean that these games are sloppy, which I think we've absolutely seen the first couple weeks. The real problem with the Chicago Bears offense and Caleb Williams at this point is Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator, has done a fantastic job, Brad. Absolutely fantastic job not protecting Caleb Williams at all. They are getting this kid absolutely pummeled. Now, I understand, Caleb's at the start of his career and he needs to make adjustments to protect himself at the offensive line with some audibles, but you've got to give him more protection. I don't know, Shane, maybe the occasional, I'm just saying, Brad, just suggestions for Shane, maybe the occasional double tight end set. Maybe occasionally keep a running back that knows how to block back to actually help protect Caleb Williams. They are going to get him killed in the next 2 weeks if they don't change their protections.
It's the same thing that happened with Justin Fields.
Yeah.
I mean, Justin Fields was running for his life for 2 years.
Yeah.
And they just never figured it out. And so I liked the addition of a guy like Keenan Allen because I thought that really took a lot of pressure because Allen's one of the best route runners the league has.
Yeah.
But without his, his heel being sore and that kind of thing, you can understand that, wide receiver lives on his feet. So you just can't, they can't perform as the same as they want to perform without one of their main people in the lineup. But I do like the Bears defense. Let's not forget the game they lost last week was to the Texans, who I think are one of the best teams in football. So, they managed to win in week 1 against the Titans. They lost a close one to the Texans in week 2, which I think a lot of people never really gave them a shot to be in that game. And so now they get a Colts team who, is a hot and cold team. You never know what to expect from those guys.
Yeah. And the Texans, along with the Panthers, are the 2 football teams in the NFL that are close to relegation at this point.
All right. So my second game is the Panthers at the Raiders, Dave. And the Raiders are a 5.5-point favorite in that one. I see no reason to put any money on the Panthers at any point. 5.5 seems like a very light line to me. I mean, I'm not in love with the Raiders offense by any means, but I do think they do a pretty good job with X's and O's. And, Carolina's going to turn the ball over to Andy Dalton this week, from what I understand. If there's one thing the Raiders can do, it's get after the quarterback a little bit. And so I don't know who that favors. Does it favor the guy like Dalton, who's a veteran and can read defenses a little bit better and get rid of the ball quicker? Or does it hurt Dalton because he's older and doesn't have much mobility? I just don't think Dalton has been in the offense long enough. That's the problem I have. If he's a veteran and he's been there all year long and he was, remember when he came in with the Cowboys and he beat the Vikings a couple of years back, but he'd been in that system, right? And so I'm just not quite sure what he brings to the table versus the guy you drafted. I think it's a little early to pull the plug, especially in light of the fact that they really have terrible weapons on that team. So there's just nothing there. And so I don't know. The Carolina management, I think, is the problem. The quarterback is just a symptom of the problem. But nonetheless, I'm going to go with the Raiders and give the 5.5.
I looked at this line and I'm like, how can this only be 5.5 with all of the things you just mentioned, Brad? And I could certainly expand on the Bryce Young experiment gone wrong. It is just I hate to see young quarterbacks in the National Football League with such high expectations, sort of fall on their face. And what I'm really wondering with the Carolina Panthers is, like, you had Bryce Young during your OTAs. You had Bryce Young during your practices during training camp. Bryce Young had the opportunity to play a little bit in preseason. What happened in the first 2 weeks of the NFL season that you hadn't seen before out of Bryce Young? I just, like, it's one of those situations where, maybe as good as Bryce Young could be someday, it's just not going to happen with this particular coaching staff and this organization behind him in Carolina. If he's going to succeed in the National Football League, it will happen down the road. And I'm not even sure he has enough skills to sort of be an Andy Dalton journeyman quarterback later in his career, the way Dalton is. So I look at this game, and this has, Raiders victory written all over it. It's got Raiders double-digit win, actually. And, you're a little hard on the Gardner and the Las Vegas Raiders there, who do have a couple nice pieces around the Gardner. So, outside of Crosby on the defensive line, I get a little concerned about the secondary and their linebacker core in Vegas. But this is the Panthers, and as I mentioned, the one of the teams in the NFL. I wish we actually had relegation in the National Football League. I think it'd be fantastic. You have to go down to the UFL.
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about the weapons on offense for Carolina. Andy Dalton, Chuba Hubbard, Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo, and Tommy Tremble. Okay, these are not household names when it comes to football. Adam Thielen maybe it was a few years ago, but Deontay Johnson had a cup of coffee moment in the sun with the Steelers. But these are not guys that scare anybody, and so I just feel like the Raiders are the far better football team here.
Yeah. All right, moving on, the Detroit Lions and the surprising upstart Arizona Cardinals, Brad. That is the next game. Lions on the road, actually favored by 3. Have you ever seen Kyler Murray look as good as he looks right now in the National Football League? He actually looks like in command of the offense. He actually looks relaxed out there. And more importantly than all of that, he actually looks happy to be in the NFL, which at times earlier in his career, he seemed to be, I don't know, just not terribly happy to be out there. I like what they're doing in Arizona on the defensive side of the ball, and certainly they have Marvin Harrison Jr., and we saw him totally explode last week. I like the Cardinals in this one. I'll take the points. I think Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions are going to be just fine. They're in for an absolute battle in this particular game, and if they're actually going to win this game, then something other than the version of Jared Goff that we saw last week is actually going to have to show up.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on this. I'm not real comfortable with the game. I think one of the reasons Kyler Murray's happy is because a young kid named Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, he's going to be happy with that for quite a while. I think he's also got one of the best tight ends in the league right now, and Trey McBride, who came on last season, and he's become a stud. James Conner is a lunch pail guy that's going to go work hard every single time he's out there. He's going to give you 100%. He's a team player. I just like the attitude of this organization right now. I'm looking at the Lions, and I'm just wondering if maybe the trickery is running thin a little bit. People have kind of figured them out a little bit. Amon-Ra St. Brown doesn't seem to be quite the same. So it's a close line. I think it's going to be a tight game. Cardinals getting 3, though. I like that it does feel like a field goal game. So I'm going to agree with you and take the Cards at home.
Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, I can't even believe I said what I said about the Cardinals. I mean, just think, Brad, about the total, 360-degree change of this football team over last year at this time. It's a team that actually has hope. I actually had one of my good friends' sons is actually going to school in the Phoenix area, and he sent me pictures from the toaster in the desert last week while he was at the Cardinals game. And we've seen this with Arizona over the years. They're really bad for a couple years. There's a new regime that comes in. The regime figures things out, and then they're really good for a couple years. And I think this organization is on the upswing at this point.
All right, I'm going to go to my third game. It's the Commanders at the Bengals. I'm going to play the over-under on this, which is sitting at 48.5. I don't like what I see from either team. I really don't. I know the Bengals somehow, some way, found a way to win last week. I still have a hard time trying to figure it out. But offensively, they don't look right. Jamar Chase barely involved in the offense last week. I think they missed Joe Mixon. It's just offensively, I just think both of these teams are really challenged. And so I look at the 48.5. That's a big line. I mean, that's one of the bigger lines of the week for two teams that have been a little bit uninspiring offensively so far. So maybe it's the early season, not playing much in the preseason. I see a lot of problems with Washington, the young quarterback. I saw one play last week where he ran out of the pocket and he got blasted in the ribs and he was down for a little bit and he got back up. They need to limit that. Otherwise, they're going to get that kid hurt real quick.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I love his game. He's been the only rookie quarterback so far that, sort of has looked pretty decent, at least from the pocket when he passes the ball. I think he's got a quarterback rating of like 95, while Caleb and Bo are, under 60 at this point. So I like what they're trying to do with him, but they're just not quite there. And I'm with you on the Bengals. I made the fantasy football mistake, Brad, of drafting T. Higgins in both of the leagues I'm in, and that's just been disastrous to this point. I'm going to go with you on this. I like the under. I think, Burrow and the Bengals are actually going to win this game. I like what they're trying to do in Washington, and I completely agree with you. They've got to figure out how to keep Jaden Daniels from hurting himself, because he will get absolutely. I mean, he's thinner than the starting quarterback at the local high school here. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the weapons, and I like McLaurin.
Yeah,
I think Brian Robinson's a big physical back. But past that, you got a young kid, McCaffrey. You got De'Ami Brown, who's, a long ways away from being great. Zach Ertz is on the tail end of his career. I just don't see much there other than McLaurin and Robinson. And so, for some reason they decided to get rid of Jahan Dotson right before the season. I understand that. It's just an organization that seems to make a lot of really stupid decisions.
One of my favorite decisions they made, Brad, was bringing in the head coach that wears his hat backwards, and one Dan Quinn. It is a organization that is at the very least trying to change the narrative, and you have to remember too. I mean, they have the bad taste in their mouth of Daniel Snyder, and as much as you use mouthwash, it does take a while for that stain to actually get out of there. So I think, it's a work in progress. Love Jaden Daniels' attitude. Love how he's playing. I remember watching him in his first game as a collegian at ASU. And I thought at the time, there's no way this kid's going anywhere else beyond ASU. And so it's been very fun to actually watch his career sort of take off. And he's got such a great personality that I hate to see him get killed out there. So hopefully he gets some protection and then does a better job not setting himself up to get pummeled in the NFL. All right, moving on. The Houston Texans at the Minnesota Vikings. Texans on the road, favored by 2.5 in this game. This is going to be a bit of a homer pick on my end. I will just admit it. 2-0 with San Clemente's very own Sam Darnold, who I've often predicted over the last 6 months would implode in the first 5 weeks of the National Football League season. And while he's thrown a couple interceptions and has had numerous mental errors, which I'm sure will continue throughout the rest of the NFL season, head coach Kevin O'Connell seems to have most of those issues in check. I'm not saying he's not going to make mistakes, because this is Sam Darnold we're talking about. But at the same time, I like what this team's doing. We don't know yet where Justin Jefferson is, from an injury perspective. Will he play or not play? I suspect he'll play. It was a quad injury. So I like what they're doing in Minnesota. This is a good Texans defense, and love Brian Flores. I think we'll figure out how to slow down CJ Stroud a little bit. It will be a different style game than the way the Houston Texans have won their first couple games this season. I like the Vikes in this one.
Boy, oh boy, Dave. I could see that coming from, all the way up north in the Bay Area. I could see that coming, right? I mean, for as many shots as you've taken at the pride of San Clemente over the last few years, to see you turning a corner I'm really proud of you. I'm really proud of you, first off. No, this is the best quarterback on the Vikings, Dave. He was the best quarterback before McCarthy got hurt. There, you heard it first, okay? Why? Because he can run a 2-minute offense. It's something Kirk Cousins couldn't do. It's something J.J. McCarthy has no experience doing, right? He didn't have to do it at Michigan. So what does Darnold do the last game? Perfect example, goes right down the field, puts a field goal on the board with zeros on the clock, and gives the other team nothing to work with. I'm not betting this game, Dave, until I find out what's going on with Justin Jefferson, until I find out what's going on with Jordan Addison.
Yeah.
Because I think the Texans are one of the best teams in football. And there's also that other element, that guy Stephon Diggs. Remember him? You don't think he wants to come home and put a stamp on things? I'm going to take the Texans in this one. It hurts my heart to do so. I feel like a traitor for turning on to my boy Sam Darnold at the biggest of moments. But I tell you what I'm impressed with the Vikings is the defense is legit. And so that's going to keep them in a lot of games. It's going to keep them playing until late November, let's just say, I think. So It's a good game. It's a tough game. It's an interesting game. If the Vikings win this game, Dave, the sky's the limit, really, because if they get healthy and get Hawkinson back, I'm telling you, that's a good football team.
Yeah, I agree. And, health is always a big thing in the National Football League. And, some teams are better from a depth perspective than other teams are. A couple things I can't let Brad get away with. One of those is Kirk Cousins is not good at the 2-minute drill. Well, I mean, that certainly statistically has never been true in Kirk Cousins' career. I forget what the number is, but it's something like 25 comeback wins in the last throughout his career in the last 2 minutes of football games. And we saw what the hobbled Cousins did against that absolutely horrific defensive strategy of the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday.
Yeah,
Night
let's
Football.
not forget about the interception that preceded it. That was hideous too. So
yeah,
look, Nick Sirianni. We haven't even touched on this yet, Dave. Nick Sirianni. Oh, come on, really? How does the guy still have a job? He's the Brendan Staley of the Eagles.
From the issue at hand. The issue at hand here is that C.J. Stroud is just an anomaly when it comes to what a rookie quarterback in the NFL is actually supposed to look like. I mean, we saw how bad Bryce Young looked, and now he's benched. We've seen these 3 young quarterbacks in the National Football League start their careers out through 2 weeks. None of them have actually thrown a touchdown yet. And across the entire NFL, touchdown passes are way down. I'm with Brad, though. I would wait on betting this until you actually know if Justin and Jordan Addison are actually going to be in this game. And in terms of San Clemente's very own Sam Darnold, like he's done a nice enough job, and he's been good enough to this point. I don't think he has as much upside as, let's say, a JJ McCarthy down the road, but I know that also makes Brad's blood boil because Brad does not believe in JJ McCarthy at all. But we'll have to table this conversation until season 6 of Gods of Odds.
Hey, look. All I know is Sam Darnold's quarterback rating right now is in the top 5 in the league. That's all you need to know. And
how much do you want to bet it's not there in week 10? That he's not in the top 5 in week 10.
I'm not going to say that, but he's done it without T.J. Hawkinson and without Jordan Addison. They got a lot of weapons there now. This is what I've been saying about Darnold since the beginning of this whole deal. Is that when he was with the Jets, they maybe had the worst talent in the history of the league offensively. He had no chance of succeeding, right? Then he goes to the Panthers, and he's got Christian McCaffrey for like a cup of coffee before McCaffrey gets dealt out to the 49ers. After that, there was nothing there. There was no talent. Maybe had Robbie Anderson or Robbie Chosen or whatever the hell his name is. Now he just got released, by the way. But that was it. There was nothing there. So he had no chance at either place he was at. He goes to the Niners, and he's going to be the backup to Purdy. So that's, that season's gone. I've always argued that we don't really know on some of these guys because if you don't put talent, same thing could be said about Bryce Young and many other guys that have preceded him. If you don't have talent around you as a quarterback, you're not going to win football games. If you don't win football games as a quarterback, you're always going to be the scapegoat, right? That or the coach, one of the two. And so with Darnold, there's just a tremendous amount of unknowns. He's got more talent now than he's ever had. So I've taken a wait and see approach. I've said, look, they got talent now. Another thing on this game, by the way, too, Joe Mixon is also questionable. So that's another reason I would kind of tend to, err on the side of caution until early Sunday morning when you start getting reports in.
Yeah.
That was a lot, Dave. I could go on and on about this, right? I mean, I know we try to get this thing over an hour, but this thing could go an hour and a half if you get me going on the Vikings.
I know.
I'm so happy right now, finally, to be rid of the Kirk Cousins dilemma. Get rid of the Kirk Cousins dilemma. It's no more of this nonsense. And McCarthy will save that for next year. Although I got a sense it's going to come back. It never goes away for me, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, Mr. Hoiseth. We could definitely go on for 2 hours on the show. There's no doubt
It's
about it.
my turn. That's right. All right.
Yeah.
So up next for me is the Patriots at the Jets. Man, Jets are 6.5-point favorites, Dave. Where'd that come from? The Jets. Are you kidding me? Have we seen something there that I'm missing? I mean,
I think the Vegas line setters were hanging out at a campfire doing some ayahuasca.
something. Yeah. I mean, these are two really good defenses. I'll give them that. And they're two really very, at best, mediocre offenses. And so I thought 6.5 was large given the low over under. It just didn't make any sense to me. I just don't view the Jets as like that much better than the Patriots. The Patriots have played very gamely the first 2 weeks. And so I'm going to take the 6.5. I'm going to take the Pats.
All right, Brad. Well, somebody's got to be winning after our first week of picks this year, and so I'm going with the Jets as a bit of a long shot. That is a lot of points to actually be giving up, especially for Aaron Rodgers, who, as you all know, at this point has not thrown for over 300 yards in some 1,000+ days. It's been 3 years, I think, since Aaron Rodgers has actually thrown for over 300 yards. And you can tell, I mean, like, they barely beat the Tennessee Titans. You know, will the head coach get fired at halftime? Thing could be shifted over to Robert Saleh and Brian Daboll at this point as the two coaches most likely to get canned at halftime. I thought for sure if the Jets actually lost to Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans on the road, Robert Saleh would have to fly back commercial and it wouldn't be on the team's charter flight back. Look, at the end of the day, the Jets defense is okay. It's not as bad as a lot of people think it is. Their offense is going to get a little bit better. Aaron seemed a little bit better against the Titans. The same way Kirk Cousins looked a little bit better in his second week as well. I think there's going to be some improvement here. Yes, the Patriots have played really well. I don't love this game. I wouldn't be throwing real money down on it, but I'm going to go ahead and take the Jets to sort of figure something out here against the Patriots in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Patriots' weapons, and they're pretty sad looking. I mean, I like Ramondre Stevenson as a back. But look at that wide receiver. I mean, that as a Viking cast-off, KJ Osborne, Julian Polk has had a really nice start at wide receiver. Demario Douglas, Hunter Henry's had some days where he looked pretty good, but I think it's just the Jacoby Brissett kind of playing close to the vest and not making a lot of big mistakes and having a good defense that's kind of kept them in games. It shouldn't be a close game when you look at the talent. I mean, the Jets do have some really good weapons. I mean, make no bones about it. Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, they're two of the best at their position. But when you watch them play, it doesn't look like it. So I don't know. I just thought 6.5 was a little rich. So I am going to take the Patriots.
In case you were wondering, North America, that was Brad Hoiseth trying to convince himself to flip-flop, unsuccessfully sticking with the Patriots in that particular one. All right, moving on. The terrible, absolutely horrible Trevor Lawrence goes up against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Bills at home, only favored by 5.5. Brad, I don't know if you've seen any Bills football at all over the last couple months, but they have one of the coolest sight lines is the pan when they pan out over the old decrepit football stadium that they're currently playing in to the new stadium that is going up right outside of the old stadium. I'm so excited that the fans of Buffalo are not only are they getting a new stadium, take note, Tennessee, it's not a dome, it's an outside stadium, as opposed to the Tennessee Titans who are moving themselves into a dome for some reason. But the people in Buffalo believe in snow, and they are going to play outside in their new stadium when it's done. All of that being said, look, Trevor Lawrence, and I've been saying this for years, is one of the most overrated quarterbacks in the National Football League. That Jaguars offense just looks like a complete and utter mess at this point. With Josh Allen, you sort of never know exactly what you're going to get from week to week. The running game has been just surprisingly very good at this point. If you want to pull up wide receiver cores that you don't recognize from a name perspective, I challenge you, Brad, to pull up the Buffalo Bills wide receiver core. It is a bunch of people that you probably didn't know were in the National Football League. You'd have to check out their histories to figure out who they are. Now, Dalvin's little brother, James, has actually been playing really well. James Cook. I like the Buffalo Bills a lot in this one. And I just have to say this one more time. Trevor Lawrence got paid all of that money. What is Jacksonville doing? He's gotten worse every year as a starting quarterback in the NFL. If he was in Carolina, he would have been benched by now.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on the Bills. I think they look really good. I mean, that performance they had against the Dolphins last Thursday was very impressive. The offense is not just about Josh Allen anymore. I mean, James Cook started to establish himself down the stretch last year, and they didn't miss a gear. They just kept going. And so Cook looks like he's going to be a force there. And you mentioned something earlier, too, about the league seems to be changing. They're getting away from as much passing. We see these trends, and it does appear as if, the running games are starting to be a little bit more important to teams than they were a couple of years ago when everybody was just throwing the ball 50 times a game. I agree with you. The wide receiving core is not something that's going to, fill out your Hall of Fame ballot or anything. Khalil Shakir is a nice young player. Mac Hollins was a cast off of the Raiders, I believe. Keon Coleman, it's just not great. They do have a nice young tight end, in Dalton Kincaid. Yeah. I think he's a pretty quality player. But it's really the defense. The defense for Buffalo looked really, really good against Miami. I think that causes a lot of problems for Lawrence and company. And so, therefore, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to take the Bills. I'm going to give the 5.5 playing at home.
Yeah. Love the Bills in this one. To me, this was, one of the easier games of the week to pick. In past years, I've said that and lived to regret it. I don't think that will be the case right now. Love what they're doing, though, what Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator, is doing with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills at this point. And I just have to wonder if what we're looking at eventually here in Jacksonville is a regime change. The Doug Peterson thing with Trevor Lawrence is just not working out. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're going to bail on the country for a couple games and go to Europe and bring their brand of bad football to Europe. So it will be interesting to see where things shake out with Doug Peterson as their head coach in the NFL at the end of the season.
All right, I'm going to go to my final game of the week, Dave, and that's the Giants at the Browns.
And why would you do this, Brad? I mean, seriously.
Probably not a game that a lot of people are going to be watching. I know I won't. But the Browns are favored by 6.5. I don't know why. I see the Giants and the Browns as both. You look at the Browns roster offensively and you go, wow, they got a lot of talent. But Deshaun Watson is turning out to be a disastrous decision for the Browns in an organization that seems to make disastrous decision after another, And so I just think the Giants will keep this game closer than 6.5. Deshaun Watson will make just enough mistakes where this is probably a game where it shouldn't be. I mean, you look at their talent with Cooper and Judy and Moore, and I'm not a big fan of Jerome Ford, and Njoku's a little dinged up. But I do think the Giants defense will keep this fairly close. And just because Watson is mistake prone, that's what he does. Hasn't been the same guy since he was in Houston his first year in the league. So I'm going to take the 6.5 of the Giants.
I'm taking the Browns in this game because I believe in Kevin Stefanski and I don't believe in Daniel Jones, and that's pretty much it. That's my sole reasoning for this one. I hate this game, honestly. There has been so much crap out there in the world since we last talked, Brad. I don't know if you saw the whole storyline about Brian Daboll was a much better coach when he had more weight on his body. But since he lost some pounds, he's been not as good as a head coach in the NFL. Hey, try getting Brian Daboll some talent. That might be try actually keeping Saquon Barkley there. I can go down the list of grievances I would have with the New York Giants organization if I were Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll can absolutely coach. So can Kevin Stefanski. And there's a reason that the Cleveland Browns have like 4 quarterbacks across their 2 rosters, their actual roster and then their practice squad roster. Yeah, I'm with you. Deshaun Watson's been absolute terrible. I was just checking my phone to see if he's had any new lawsuits since we started this broadcast. The other thing I was going to say is, total shell of himself. You're absolutely right about that. One last note about Deshaun Watson. The wife and I were actually watching Selling Sunset's latest season on Netflix the other day, Brad. And in one of the episodes, Deshaun Watson and his girlfriend show up. And they're taking a look at a $15 million mansion in the hills of Hollywood, I think it was. And my wife turns to me and she goes, "Who's that?" And I explained the whole Deshaun Watson story to her, and she's just shocked that he's still allowed to play in the NFL.
It's pretty unbelievable, really, when you think about it. But somehow, some way, guys always seem to find a way back into the league, Dave.
That they do. All right, final game, Brad. Super quick. It is the Ravens at the Cowboys. Ravens at Cowboys. Ravens are actually favored by 1 right now. Shocking to me. I think the Cowboys are actually going to turn things around in this game. I like the Cowboys. It's going to be really interesting in Baltimore when they leave Dallas 0-3. Mike Zimmer's predictable. And so's John Harbaugh at this point. And I think what we're looking at here is a very predictable football game, unlike what the New Orleans Saints actually did to the Dallas Cowboys last week, where they basically ran a playoff style offense against the Dallas Cowboys, and they had no idea what hit them. Derek Carr went deep numerous times at the beginning of that game, and literally they scored like 3 or 4 touchdowns without even getting touched. Mike Zimmer will be all over this Dallas Cowboy defense this week. They will play significantly better than they did last week. And they're also going to be playing against a significantly more predictable offense in the Baltimore Ravens. As much as I love watching Lamar Jackson play, I think this week the Cowboys are actually going to win this one.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on this one. I saw an interesting stat last week that bouncing back from a loss going into last week's game, that I think Lamar Jackson had won 11 out of his previous 12 games after they had lost a game. And so I thought for sure that was like the easiest bet of the week, and then they turn around and they disappointed me last week. So yeah. I just don't think it's the same team right now. You add a big piece of a puzzle like a Derrick Henry who's making all that money, and now suddenly he's going to demand the ball, right? I mean, you're spending a lot of money on the guy for a reason, and it changes the offensive mindset from, Jackson was and is still, I think, the most dangerous runner on the team. But if you look at that wide receiving crew, there's Zay Flowers is a number 3 guy. Rashad Bateman's a 3 guy. Nelson Aguilar in his best day was a 2 guy. There's just not a lot there. Mark Andrews is old. They got to get some young kids into that offense. Isaiah Likely needs to catch more passes. They just need to look for a wide. They've never addressed the wide receiver situation. I think it's always hurt them. They've always rotated running backs, and they've had success there regardless of who it is. But now with Derrick Henry there, you kind of have to – you're going to have to give him the ball. I mean, it's just they made a statement that we're going after a big power back that's going to give us a dominating running game. I don't think they're as dangerous of a football team as a result of that. So I'm going to agree with you. I think the Cowboys, that loss last week was a little bit stunning. It left a bad taste in my mouth. I thought they were a pretty good team coming into the season. Yeah, I think you predicted they would win the Super Bowl last year. I don't know if you're going to do the same this year or not, but we're not going down that road. But I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to take the Cowboys and the point. It's a close game, tight battle. Could come down to a field goal, but I'm going to take the boys.
All right. So in terms of our Super Bowl predictions, we're going to do those next week on the show, not this week. It gives Brad a chance to actually really think about them. A lot of people do their Super Bowl predictions, before the start of the season, but nothing wrong with doing your Super Bowl predictions, if you will, when you're almost a quarter of the way through the NFL season. So I think we'll do our big Super Bowl picks next week on the Gods of Odds. I have to say, I mean, I didn't love the hire of Mike Zimmer as the defensive coordinator of this Dallas Cowboy team, simply because I feel like there's times when Mike Zimmer becomes extraordinarily predictable as a defensive coordinator. As great as he can be, he's certainly very predictable. And I sort of felt like this Dallas Cowboy team needed something a little bit different than that. And the New Orleans Saints last week, I mean, we haven't talked about the Saints at all. I mean, Derek Carr has just looked just absolutely fantastic. And with the young offensive coordinator in New Orleans, one of the Kubiak kids is the OC there. They've actually looked really good. And I haven't seen Alvin Kamara, Brad, actually look as young as he's looked, in years. I mean, there have been years where I've picked Alvin Kamara for my fantasy football team and just been flat out disappointed. And I thought he was at the end of his career for sure, and he looks great right now.
Yeah, they've changed the offense a little bit. Kamara looks great. Rashid Shaheed has played really, he's an exciting young player. Carr, though, is unpredictable. He has one good game, 2 good games, and then he has 1 or 2 bad ones. So I just think the bad ones they're coming at some point, Dave. I really think in terms of like Zimmer, though, I just, it's these retreads. I don't like the retread theme. I don't. It's like the Vikings pulled off a coup last year or a couple of years ago when they got Flores, right? I mean, that defense was terrible. And they have turned in a very short window into one of the better defenses in the league. And so the game has changed. I just feel like it's kind of passed guys like Zimmer by. And so I'm not entirely sold on the Zimmer hiring in Dallas, but for this week anyways, I'm going to take the Cowboys.
All right, there you go. Season number 5 of Gods of Odds is officially kicked off. We haven't even talked about the new crazy kickoff rules, which are silly, crazy and stupid, and I just don't understand why they didn't ask the kickers to kick off from the 20. Anyways, I mean, like there were other ways to actually increase the amount of kickoff returns if that's really the goal. But we'll cover that on another day. Brad, any final thoughts as we head into week number 3 of your National Football League season?
Well, I suspect that this weekend you're going to start seeing the offenses start to, I mean, they started a little bit last week. The first week was pretty sloppy. But I think you're going to see them start to kick into gear, and some of those veterans that we've been expecting to kind of break out, the Travis Kelce's of the world, who haven't really done much. I think they're about to find their legs underneath them and start playing better football. I expect to see things take a little more normalcy, right? Is that the word? Normalcy, yeah.
Normalcy.
Normalcy. That's probably not a good one, right? But anyways, that's my thought. This week, things get a little bit more normal, let's just say. And the offenses start to find their way.
All right. Well, Brad, great to be back with you for season number 5 of Gods of Odds. I will keep a closer eye on the point shaving that went down last year in our Gods of Odds battle. The only defense I could have is that there was some point shaving along the way. I have no proof of this. It's just a feeling. Anyways, thanks so much for tuning in. That is Brad Hoiseth over there in beautiful Southern California. I'm Dave Dabbah up in Northern California, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.
This is Phoenix.